I don't hear any sound.
Hello.
No, I hear Rick.
I'm here.
You know,
Sorry I'm late.
I had the wrong buttons pressed. Wow.
Well, you may have been late, but James was late too, Rick.
Oh, good. Great
Yeah.
minds think alike.
For those that are watching, welcome to WeatherBrains 445. I was doing my best to say that, but my mic was turned off. So now you can hear me. WeatherBrains 445. It's a Wednesday night special. This could be the greatest show ever, or perhaps the worst. We don't know. When we get out of our normal Monday night slots, things tend to get a little wild here. So we are glad you're with us. Let me be sure I got everything set up here. Got to be sure I got the right link over on the live page, and we'll get this going. This is the pre-show, by the way. If you're just watching this on YouTube, you've just discovered us. We'll start the produced show here in a matter of moments. And we have, I think a lot of our regulars are out tonight. Brian is out. Dr. John is out. Is Aubrey in or out?
I don't remember. I'd invite her, James, but I don't remember what she said. I don't think I would remember if she were going to be in. So either she's not notified us, or I just don't remember her telling us that she's out.
And I don't know. I didn't mention the Wednesday night show Monday. You know, I had to go do the television thing. Okay, I figured some of you guys would do that.
Nate clearly did at the end. And,
okay.
And I did in the future bookings department.
All right, let's see if I can bring in our guests here.
Yeah, Trevor's standing by for sure, and just hoping Dr. Maui shows up. He confirmed yesterday.
Trevor Bouchet?
I think it's Bouchet, right?
Bouchet, yes. Birchett, right?
No. Boucher.
It looks like Boucher, but it's Boucher.
Yeah, Boucher. It's Boucher.
Okay.
I sent you the link on the email.
Yeah,
so you need it in the chat.
No, I'm good.
He was extremely diligent to get his Google Plus ready and everything.
All right, let's see. TREVOR BOUCHER. I hope this is the right one. I just invited one in here. We'll see if he's the right one.
There were a bunch of them. You wouldn't think there would be many of that name, but there are a bunch.
And
he's got on like a little suit standing in front of a sort of a... No, that may be a different thing. Yeah, I think that is right. He's standing in front of a historic building or something.
Now I got to find out why
our
video is not showing up in the on the video page over there.
Are we going to be on television tonight, James?
No.
Darn.
They're going to run it Monday night.
Oh, good. Okay.
Let's see what is going on here.
I saved you some goat curry in case you didn't get dinner, James.
Oh, please. Hey, Ryan, can you hear us? Hey, Ryan. Hello, Ryan. Blow the foghorn, see if that'll get him going here. Uh-oh. And I got to reset my foghorn. I got all kind of problems here.
Technical difficulties. Anxious for vacation.
Let's see.
That probably means you didn't invite the right Trevor because he's standing by. Let's see.
Let me click on his link again and I'm pretty sure I invited him. I see his picture that you sent in the email, and pretty sure that's the guy. Let me try it one more time.
I just asked him if he saw the invite, and he says he hasn't seen it yet. Look at that little bell in the top right quadrant. Plus page.
Well, there's a lot of Trevor Bouchers on here. Goodness. Maybe I didn't invite the right one.
I figured the audio. Did I figure out the microphone right?
Yeah, Ryan, can you hear us okay?
I can hear you guys. You hear me?
Yeah,
Now we can.
Good.
Let's see here. Rick, you okay?
I am.
You're in Amarillo?
I'm in Amarillo this evening, yeah.
We're racking up frequent flyer miles, aren't we, Rick?
Frequent rental car miles, maybe. Is this audio okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, you sound good.
Okay.
Very clean. Yeah, I see. He's like in a suit with some kind of statue behind him.
Yeah, that's him. He said he saw you just add him as a friend.
Yeah, I've got him in a circle here. Let me try him one more time. Usually, when it'll come right up. I've got a Trevor Birchett, Birchett, but that's not the right guy.
Nope. If you put the link in and go right to his profile page.
Let me try that. That might work. Copy link, and then we're going to put it in here. That didn't work.
You need another link?
No, I'm looking at his page, but it won't let you use a direct link when you invite people.
Really?
Let me see if I can get his. Has he got a Gmail address? Oh, wait, I got it. Yeah, I see it right here. And then let me try that. Sometimes you can stick a Gmail address right in there. Yeah, there it is. All right, that worked. Okay, so now he's been invited. I just got a personal note from Robert Albritton. I'm starting to get emotional here. This is I feel like I'm going through a divorce.
And when you come back, will the station be gone, or will they moved everything, or what?
No.
That would be Trevor.
Hello. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can. You're pretty loud, Trevor.
Okay, I'll try to work on that.
Are your earbuds plugged in?
They're plugged in just fine.
Good. Got his Texas Tech shirt on.
Popping noise? That might be coming from me. Hang on here. Let me do something.
James is an audio professional.
All right, now I've got that fixed. I think we're all here.
Yeah.
How do I sound now, guys?
James?
Am I still pretty loud?
The background noise has gone away. You like count to 5 or something.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
It sounds like we're hearing you off the internal mic off your laptop. I don't know if you got a mic on your, one of these little microphones on here or not, but you can go into the settings, that little gear up there, and change your audio source if you want to.
Okay.
Ryan, do you have any idea what you're getting into here?
Tonight? Not really.
This could be the worst hour of your life.
I have a self-imposed media ban. I'm still on my media ban.
Yeah, we're not media.
No, this is not. This is about as unmainstream media as you can get. You trust me. You will be. So when was the last time you did a media interview, Ryan?
I have never done media interviews. I refused all of them. I'll do print, and if somebody emails me questions or talks to me on the phone, as long as it's on the record.
This is great. We have an exclusive here. I mean, this is awesome. I mean, this could take us right to the top.
You and Spencer Atkins from January. He was on Hot Air back in January.
Oh, yeah, I was with Brad.
Fan of it?
Yeah, I guess that counts, then.
It does.
Am I sounding any better now?
Yeah, that sounds better, Trevor.
Okay. I think I figured it.
Give us like a count to 10 so we can kind of listen to you.
1, 2, 3. This would be the level at which I'd probably be talking. Everything hopefully sounds okay.
Yeah. Have you got a mic down here on your on the earbuds you're wearing, or what mic are you using?
I'm supposed to be using the one that's on the just right here on my desktop. I don't think the one here would work.
So yeah, okay. Well, if all you got's the audio that's off on your your laptop, then that's what it's going to sound like. So.
Well, I'm sorry if it sounds bad.
Well, it's okay. This is a strange show here because still a large majority of people listen to the produced podcast, and but we've introduced this new subset of people that watch the show, and so we're doing video and audio, but audio is still the big deal here. But all right, let me double check and be sure we're up on the right pages here. So we're competing against Sharknado, You know.
You know, it's funny. I'm searching. I have my tweet deck up, and I'm looking at the hashtag for Sharknado 2, and I've never seen a hashtag populate so fast. It's just raining down tweets.
Same thing will be happening when we get on the air too with the WeatherBrains tweet, the WeatherBrains hashtag.
Right,
you can't even keep up with it.
Let's get this sucker started. All right, here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. WeatherBrains! WeatherBrains episode number 445. This is for, well, let's see here. This is going to be for August 4th, 2014. But the little secret is the fact that we're actually doing the show on July 30th, 2014. And now that we've confused everybody, we're just glad you're here. This is one of these vacation weeks. I'm James Spann, and I typically take 2 weeks in the summer. Summers are very short now when you have school-age children, and we're down to one left, and he's about to graduate in a year, and there will be empty nesters. But our school starts here on August the 7th. So we have to cram in these vacation weeks. So I had one back in June. I've got this one. So we're doing the show on a Wednesday night. And for those watching via video or maybe watching live or whatever, you know the deal. But most of you are catching this the first week of August. Whatever. We're glad you're here. Thank you for taking the time to join us here on the dog days of summer. Because of the odd schedule we have, a lot of our regulars are gone. We've got Dr. John Scala, who is on vacation this week, and he's unable to join us. Brian Peters sent the mystery note saying, I have a previous engagement, and we fully understand that he's probably at Wesley's Booby Trap Lounge, enjoying a cocktail this evening, so Brian is out, and Aubrey, she's probably working tonight, and she is not with us, or maybe she's with Brian at the Booby Trap. I don't know. But, you know, she's about to get married. She's very busy, and it's a busy time for her. But we do have Rick Smith, who is quite a trooper. Rick is on the road, a road warrior in Amarillo, Texas. Rick is the warning coordination meteorologist for the National Weather Service in Norman, Oklahoma. And Rick, welcome to the show from your remote location.
I'm glad to be here from a cool and damp Amarillo. The forecast for tomorrow morning says it's going to be 55. I didn't bring the right clothes, I don't think. So, going to be interesting. We're here for a National Weather Service office in Amarillo is conducting a integrated warning team meeting tomorrow, and there's a whole group of us here from the Oklahoma City area, including Damon Lane from KOCO and emergency managers for the City of Moore and for Moore Medical Center. We're going to do a panel discussion all about the May 20th tornado from last year. So got about 125 people registered. So should be good. And looking forward to it.
Give us like the short explanation of integrated warning team. A lot of people maybe are listening and they don't know what that is or how that works. I think it's a great idea. We've done them here and they're fantastic. So what's the brief explanation for those that don't know about an IWT meeting?
The integrated warning team is made up of three main components: National Weather Service, the broadcast media, and the emergency management public safety community. So this is the system that makes all the warnings work. When things work well, it's because all three members of that team are working together. So these integrated warning team meetings are meant to get all the key members of that team together and talk about issues and work out problems and things like that. This may be kind of a hybrid IWT meeting that we're doing tomorrow, but it's kind of the first step into doing that. Most weather service offices do this either formally or informally. It's, the partnerships are critical, and that's what these meetings are all about.
Cool. Well, very good. I think it's a great idea, and thanks for taking the time to join us tonight, Rick, from Amarillo. And I should mention Nate Johnson is not on tonight. Nate is, I think, working the morning shift. And again, we've talked about the morning shift on the television side. It is nasty. It is bad. You get up at like 2 a.m., so he's out tonight. But Bill Murray, are you still in Canada, or where are you tonight?
Yeah, one of the weather events that I always wanted to experience, James, was a heat burst, and we had one last night. Temperature at 11 o'clock was 77 degrees, and with these dying thunderstorms just to the north, when they finally collapsed, the temperature jumped to 84 degrees, and the winds gusted to 53 miles an hour, and it was quite an event. So I'd always wanted to experience one, and I got to live through one in Calgary.
Ooh, very cool. Well, bring in our guests before they hang up on us.
Yeah, James. Oh, and by the way, James, I've got some goat curry left from dinner last night. I always save you the best food, so in case you didn't get dinner tonight, I got it right here in the refrigerator in my Hampton Inn. So, but anyway, tonight's guest panelist is an intern at the National Weather Service in Nashville. His bachelor's and his master's are from Texas Tech University. Trevor Boucher, welcome to WeatherBrains. How are you?
Very good. Thank you for having me. I've been very excited to be part of the show.
Well, I see you're proudly sporting that Red Raiders shirt there, and ready for football season?
Oh, very much so. Can't wait for it to start.
So as we change briefly to college football brains, what are the prospects for the Red Raiders this year?
Cautiously optimistic, but I think any well-seasoned Red Raider would say the same thing. You always want to hope for the best and make sure that you've got plenty of hope. And then we're continuing to be surprised. Last year we started out 7-0, and then lost our next 5 games. So, but then we ended up finishing pretty strong, beating Arizona State in the bowl game. So, everyone's hoping that we're on the up and up, and it looks like it's that way.
Well, good luck, and we were excited to have you on tonight. We're going to talk about some items related to VOS and to what you and David Drobny have done with the T-Spotter program in Nashville, and learn a little bit about your career and how you got into where you are. And we'll do that right after the recorded segments tonight. So thank you for joining us as a panelist, and we'll get ready for our guest Weather Brain. So thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
And I guess our guest Weather Brain tonight, his team probably has a much better chance of winning the national championship than some of our teams tonight. He's a real ace, as you'll learn from the discussion tonight. He grew up in northern Michigan, attended the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor for his undergraduate, master's, and PhD from Florida State. He's a part of Weatherbell Analytics, a private weather forecasting firm. His bio says that he's a research atmospheric scientist with expertise in synoptic and dynamic meteorology, numerical weather prediction analysis, and tropical cyclone climate interactions. Dr. Ryan Maui, welcome to the show.
Hi there, Bill. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I say Florida State has a very good chance of winning the national championship again. Vegas has us, I believe, favored in every game, so I think it would be a disappointment here if we didn't repeat. As long as our Heisman quarterback stays on the right side of.
I think they're.
Somebody dropped off.
Well, just keep him out of public.
We're still here. You're still there.
So you know how that goes. But
yeah, as long as
I
keeps away from the crab legs and the pellet bones.
I'm here.
I think we'll be just fine.
Well, he's quite a player. So I
Tallahassee
guess Rick Smith might have something to say.
Yeah, Tallahassee has a very interesting climate here in terms of football, and it's not like a Big Ten town where sort of the football is an all-day, all-week type of activity. It's a lot of traveling into town, so quite a big contingent comes from South Florida. So it's a little bit different than up north in Michigan.
Well, Ryan, talk for a moment about Weatherbell, how it came into be, and what you guys do.
Weatherbell is just a small business. It was started with the CEO, Michael Barak, and his college friend, Mike Shanahan, who manages the money. And Joe Bastardi and Joe DeLeo are the senior forecasters. So these four came together and decided to start a company from scratch. And in the year afterwards, they developed a website, put together their business model, and then they decided they needed some weather maps. And I was providing them sort of free of charge to the internet or anybody else that wanted them, running on a server at home on my kitchen table. And eventually they decided that it might be just best to bring me on board to develop all this from scratch map site. And after a little bit of wrangling back and forth and a few phone calls from Joe Bastardi, we got the ball rolling, and I retired from my postdoc at NRL Monterey and drove east from California to Atlanta. I needed a place to live, so that's where I chose to live. And after a year in Atlanta, I'm back here in Tallahassee, where there's cheaper living, a little bit warmer climate. Not sure if you know that Atlanta's actually got a pretty harsh winter. Not comfortable there.
Especially this January it was.
Yeah, so my day involves now a little bit of coding during the day, maintaining weather maps and data for our clients. And that's premium customers who are their subscribers that log in, as well as a batch of commercial subscribers that have access to the forecast that Joe and myself and a couple others with our team produce. But we still have a very small business mentality. We're agile, and we have some pretty good computer programmers on our staff that are developing new tools and constantly keeping up with essentially the newest open source technology out there. And that's the big thing in meteorology is everything is moving to open source. So everybody has free access to the same data and methods as the next guy. The one exception is, of course, the European Center's data, which is not even close to free and never will be.
So can you talk about how much that data costs, Ryan?
In order to get enough data to make it worth your while, like temperatures over North America or Europe and any other variables, precip, you become immediately a maximum charge customer. You exceed the download requirements to where you could actually go on there right now and purchase just one variable for one day, and you may be able to buy that for a few $100s. But once you become a downloader of multiple gigabytes a day, you become maximum charge, which right now is about $250,000 after the tariffs and exchange rate per year. So that's just a flat fee that you have to pay, and that gives you 75 gigabytes per day, and that is it. So some may have experience, say, downloading GFS. You could easily get 20, 30 gigabytes of GFS when you start getting every vertical level, or you get a bunch of surface fields. The thing about ECMWF is it's higher resolution, so you get many more grids. You get a lot more grid points, and it requires me and Weatherbell to pick and choose which parts of the world we actually want the data from, because we can't, within our data bandwidth, you can't get the entire world. You can't get all the data they produce. That would be like a terabyte per day, especially with the ensembles. So ECMWF's business model is very smart. Not everybody actually requests the same data, so and they just don't put it out on an FTP for you to grab. They push it to you, and then they push it to all their customers at the same time. So everybody gets the same data at the same time. There's no favoritism, and everybody has the same priority. And I would say that based upon their revenue, I'd say there's 20 to 30 maximum charge customers in the world, and other business partners they have are the governments of the EU that are member states of the ECMWF, and that's obviously different than what we have here in the United States, where I guess the equivalent would be all 50 states still fall under the National Weather Service, whereas the European Union, the individual countries have their own weather bureau still. You know, UK Met, the French, Germans, but they collaborate and also receive ECMWF data as well.
So Brian, that's an amazing story of basically a private model providing a very important service to meteorology all over the world. That's pretty unique, isn't it?
Well, the European
in terms of
data,
modeling, I mean, at least.
Yeah, ECMWF does that because they've always had the next generation of computer technology. They've always been, in some cases, a decade ahead of NCEP. The Japanese, for instance, if you remember in the beginning of the 2000s, had the Earth simulator, and they took advantage of that for their numerical weather prediction and their models. UK Met has always been at the forefront of computing for climate modeling, and they've since put a lot of their computing technology into meteorology. But if you remember, after the Hurricane Sandy, there was a supplemental bill pushed through Congress that provided umpteen $1 million for their weather service to purchase a brand new computer and invest in the newest computing technology, run GFS at higher resolution, more ensembles, push NCEP NWP into the next decade. And it was literally the next week ECMWF announced that they're going to spend $50 million on their next generation of computer, which was just going to blow NCEPs out of the water. So there's a tit for tat. There's a competition between NCEP and NOAA and the ECMWF. But in the background, under the hood, everybody's collaborating for the one common purpose, the one goal, and that's to produce the best forecast. So there's a friendly competition. There's not there's sharing of the data, sharing of the models, and if a new technique is developed, it's usually spread out through the entire numerical weather prediction community relatively quickly, because if it's going to work the best, then everybody's going to want it. It's just that the ECMWF revenue model, since their purpose, the medium range part of their forecasting model, they don't have to issue severe weather warnings. They don't have to watch the weather like the NWS does and have to issue advisories or forecasts. They can specifically concentrate on medium range weather prediction, and that's as part of their goal. Whereas the National Weather Service, NCEP, they have to focus on a multitude of goals. They have climate, they have ocean, the marine, volcano, tsunami, snow, ice. They've got it all. So NCEP has many more responsibilities than ECMWF, whereas they can focus very narrowly on that one goal.
So Ryan, I guess that it takes a tremendous amount of computing power and bandwidth for you to be able to ingest all the information and process it and put it up as beautifully as you do on the Weatherbell servers, right?
There's a fair amount of computing. We lease servers from a company called Codero. There's other options. When I started with Weatherbell about 2 years ago, and those included Rackspace, GoDaddy, and other dedicated server companies. But the issue always with the computing is the bandwidth. And if you're going to serve data or you're going to download large amounts of data, you don't want to be on a meter. You don't want to be charged for the up and down. So the dedicated servers that I use are essentially just Dell power edges that you could buy off their website. But they're managed by another company. So we don't have to worry about the power, we don't have to worry about the internet, and we generally don't have to worry about the maintenance. And they're given to us with root control, and I think we now have getting close to 20 32-core servers that I put together in a cluster. So I learned enough Linux cluster management throughout my graduate school, and then when I was at NRL Monterey, where you can use all the nodes together with network file storage to put those graphics out there as soon as you get the data. So the turnaround needs to be instant. Some things are prioritized over others. Obviously, people aren't going to be gnashing their teeth if NavGem doesn't come in on time. But GFS, NAM, its Nest, ECMWF, I usually try to turn those around within a minute or two. And I use an open source graphics program called GRADS. It's used in the community since about 1995, 99. And you can do coding and you can do the graphics all at the same time. And the reason why it's so easy to use and beneficial after you get over the learning curve is it handles the raw meteorology data, which is in GRIB format. And once you know how to deal with a GRIB file, or now it's a GRIB2 file, which is a gridded binary file, or even a netcdf file, once you can handle that, the keys to the entire data set just open up, and you become an immediate big data analyzer. You don't need Python, you don't need NCL, you don't need anything other than just grads. And I'd encourage any graduate student, if you're going to learn one language right away, if you're going to do it in Synoptic or Synoptic Lab or in Dynamics class to do a project, just learn grads. Because once you get over that initial learning curve where you can go beyond just making a graphic, a pretty map, once you can go into the programming side of it, which is actually fairly easy, then anything and everything opens up immediately. And you can somebody can give you data and you can do whatever you want with it. So it's essentially what I did with Weatherbell is, as I was learning throughout my graduate career in 2005, I was starting to put maps to the web, so 10 years ago. And that code is the same code I use now. There's maybe, instead of using 100 colors, we now can use 256. So there's slight improvements. But the weather maps that I produce are obviously for public consumption. They're not, a lot of them aren't technically correct, but they're, for temperature, it's how temperature is going to feel, for instance. Whereas for other variables, I don't know what vorticity is supposed to look like. I don't know what color it is. But there's definitely other variables that there's supposed to be a sense of feeling. And I think as you get enough use and social media saturation with a lot of images, then people expect and are used to those type of images. Just like just about everybody has the same radar color bar. I mean, there would be a lot of confusion if all of a sudden the radar bar was totally reversed or something. So the computing aspect of it is the least of my worries at this point, where we can definitely use and abuse, and the computing power is running our own weather models, where you run your own WRF model, for instance. That can be where a client may want a very specific location and they want very high resolution time-wise data. Say a power plant in a location that wants minute or sub-hourly data. We're going to be starting to get some of that with the high-res rapid refresh, but until then, the only really option at this point is you're going to have to make the data yourself. And that's the key, I think, for meteorology going forward, is a lot of folks are going to be running their own models. So there's going to be quite a few personal and outfits like the Weather Channel, AccuWeather, whoever has a big computer will be able to run a large domain WRF and use that as a complement to what NCEP is providing for free. And that's the key. Obviously, NCEP is providing just an enormous wealth of information that I take advantage of on a daily basis. And here in the United States, it's free. That we have open data, and even the experimental data is usually provided to the web for free. So here we're able to take free data and the data that we buy from the ECMWF and provide value-added services on top of it. And that's clearly the future of where meteorology is going. It's big data, but it's also adding value. And at the first level, that's just a simple map. And then as you go up, it's some sort of analysis on that map. And then you need to have the human at the back end to throw away the bad forecasts and to use your intuition to pick out the best forecast, for instance.
So Ryan, how much validation and verification do you do on the model data that you're hosting?
That was part of my work at NRL Monterey, was to do validation. The model there was no gaps back in the 90s and until it was upgraded to NavGem. It's a new name. It's basically the same model. And much of the verification was done comparing that model to GFS and the ECMWF. And the key to looking at models together is one may tend to have a bias. But if you constantly verify it against itself, its own analysis, you're not going to be able to see that bias. So it's very important to look at two models side by side, and over a long time period, maybe 6 months or a year, you can pick out by differencing those models at various, analysis, 3 days, 5 days, you can pick out the bias. So it was very easy to see, in NavGem there's a upper tropospheric temperature bias in the tropics, over the Galapagos, for instance. And then once you see where those bias occur, then you can go into the code and you might be able to find an error. Because that's actually the key to a lot of weather forecasting these days, is there are still a lot of errors in the code. A lot of silly fudge factors or minus signs or stuff that's just wrong in the code that they can actually be fixed. UK Met's had this instance, ECMWF, and NSEP, of course. But the verification is important at all lead times, not only in local places, but over the hemisphere as a whole. So if you have the weather forecasts over the last decade, and you compare 5-day forecast skill over the northern hemisphere between ECMWF and GFS, there's always a constant wide gap. GFS isn't catching up to ECMWF because ECMWF itself keeps getting better. So if you normalize the differences, it's just about always the same. But clearly the pecking order right now is ECMWF and then everybody else. And that includes UK Met, the Canadian global model, and GFS. And then there's some other contenders like NavGem, and the Chinese have a global system. JMA's data isn't provided publicly to double check. And the key then is the models tend to have errors in the same spot at the same time, because they're going to have errors where the active weather is occurring. So if there's a trough digging or a ridge building or a hurricane going in whatever direction, some sort of interaction, that's where the errors are going to be. So the weather models are starting out at the same point, and the analysis very close. They're all forecasting the same atmosphere. However, whatever they do with it is slightly different. And if you track those differences of how the model reacts, each model individually reacts throughout the 5-day forecast, then you can pick out where you're going to have large areas of uncertainty. And if you have enough models and you have enough forecasts, you can start to pick out information and patterns. And you can use that to your advantage in order to post-process or fix your forecast. So I'd say that that's the next, another part of meteorology, the commercial side of it, whereas there's post-processing done to the global models that you may be able to squeeze out a little bit of extra added skill. Or, as another example, if you're sitting on the Chicago Merc, you're sitting on the floor and you're watching GFS come in, and you're looking for a very specific thing, a trend in the GFS model as the forecast comes in, you can push your button a minute or two before the next guy, and you can make a trade or somehow have an added benefit by knowing just ahead of time by a little bit what's going to happen with that model. So that forecast may not pan out, but you have information about the uncertainty of it that maybe the other guy doesn't. So verification is obviously very important for a variety of issues, but I would say that for me it's the 5-day skill score. Which model is king? And it's been ECMWF for a decade, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. I think if we came back 10 years from now, it'd be the same situation.
So Ryan, take just a moment and talk about the importance of ensembles and what what these terms mean that some folks may not be familiar with. Between the ensemble mean and the deterministic and the control. What do those things mean, and how do you use them?
Well, I guess in editorial comments, ensembles are useful if you know how to use them. There's a lot of folks during the build-up, as I've heard, from the 90s and through 2000s, where ensemble techniques were developed. A lot of people complain that they were just, it's a waste of computer time. Now, you're running the forecast once, but now you want to run it 30 times or 50 times. So they'd run it at lower resolution in order to buy the computer space, for instance. So that's essentially what the ensemble is doing, is it's going to highlight those areas of uncertainty that I talked about, because at the initial time, if you have a area of interest, and that's going to be dynamically active, and you followed along the forecast trajectory during 3-5 days, the best example, I suppose, is let's say it's a hurricane, and it's recurving off the East Coast. Now, when you look at the spaghetti, the model spaghetti, you're going to have a bunch of different options, but generally they're going to be within a pretty narrow window. But in some instances, you have where the spaghetti from different models and within the ensemble, if you look at ensemble spaghetti, like say what's Hurricane Sandy, I think 6 days ahead of time, you had some going due north, some spaghetti from the ensemble going into New Jersey, and then just as many going out to Portugal. So that type of uncertainty, and that's really, what do you do with that forecast? So there's times where the ensemble may not be as useful, and what then you want is the ensemble mean. You want to go, let's just go straight down the middle and hedge our bets. And that's sort of the knock on ensembles, is that it's just in a very expensive way to smooth the forecast and get a smooth value. Because when you do that, when you start taking individual ensembles, which are they're just weather forecasts with a slightly different initial condition, and it's just a very small perturbation at time 0, and then those perturbations grow as you go out through time. So you might start seeing very large differences at day 3, day 4, day 5. But before then, it's very hard to find differences. So if we go back to the Hurricane Sandy example, by time day 5 came, when the storm was in, I guess, southeast of Cuba, or southeast off of Cuba, there was still considerable uncertainty about where that storm was going. So in this instance, the ensembles provided perturbations in the upper level flow way upstream, say over the Gulf of Alaska, or whatever was going to influence that block over northeast Canada. And if you perturb those areas and you allow those, I guess what you call the errors, to grow in the forecast, and you look at the differences between the ensemble members, so you look at either mean difference or root mean squared difference, and then you start looking at the spaghetti, the features, then the picture starts to emerge about where the active region is going to occur, or where the most active dynamics are. And if you know that ahead of time, if you know that, say, the hot spot for the forecast is going to be over the Gulf of Alaska for a 5-day forecast, you can actually then send a plane to take additional observations in the Gulf of Alaska and help your model out by getting that part of the forecast correct. And the part of the forecast correct as you want is at the initial conditions. So I guess the summary, the best way to describe the ensembles is that they're it's essentially running the same model 20 to 50 additional times, and it's a slightly different initial condition at time 0. Now there's one of them is just run at usually at lower resolution just because of the computer power. So the difference in resolution for GFS is the difference between 27 kilometers and about 50 kilometers. So that's in terms of the grid cells. Now here's another thing maybe that folks don't realize, is that when you talk about a resolution of a model and you have the grid cells of, say, 27 kilometers or 4 kilometers, that's the grid cells. You're not actually resolving a feature on that scale. The feature that you can resolve is on a larger scale than that, because you need multiple grid cells in order to represent it. So you're actually only seeing features, say with GFS, on maybe a 54 to 71 kilometer scale, which is 2 to 3 times the grid spacing. And same with the WRF model at 4 kilometers. You may only actually be seeing features at, say, 12 kilometer resolution. And I think we have to take care whenever we start saying now that the high-res rapid refresh is just a 3 kilometer model. Well, it's not resolving features on 3 kilometers. It's not going to resolve you a tornado. It'll resolve you a larger circulation, which is on the order of 10 to 12 kilometers, for instance. So that's the deal with Ensembles then, is that if we run the model many more times, we'll have much more additional information to talk about uncertainty. And I think it's a worthwhile endeavor. It's very computationally expensive. It's going to use up most of your forecasting cycles, and that's why they're typically run after the deterministic. So GFS and then the Jeff's ensembles come out later. ECMWF ensembles come out about an hour and a half after the deterministic. So you have to wait for them. They add, I think, a little bit of additional information, but for some folks, there's still a debate in the community about whether that's the silver bullet. You know, instead of let's run high-res rapid refresh 20 times, let's have 20 ensembles at 3 kilometers. Whereas other folks say, you know what? No, let's just run 1 kilometer globally. Let's have a T5999 model. Let's just use the entire computer, all the CPUs, and just run one highest resolution forecast possible. So there's going to be that balance going forward as the computing technology improves to where we actually have that option. My vote would be just highest resolution forecasts as possible. So let's use the computer and everything it's got, and let's allow people that have analysis capabilities, post-processing, to use that data and provide the best value added.
Hey Ryan, we talked a little bit about some of the spaghetti plots and the hurricane models, and you know, all this model business used to be very much behind the scenes. You know, nobody saw this. Now it's out there where everybody can see it, including people that have zero training, and it's not uncommon nowadays. You know, I know it wasn't that many years ago in the Weather Service we had a page that was password protected that we could go to see the hurricane models, all the different the spaghetti plots of the hurricanes for each named storm or investigated storm. What's your opinion of that? Well, I mean, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? What do you think about all of this stuff being out there just wide open for everybody to look at, and what are the impacts of that?
Well, I think part of the reason why weather maps have sort of caught on now is obviously social media. And for me and for Weatherbell, the maps that I produce are popular because the Weather Service's maps are so bad. The Weather Service uses the program GEMPAC. It's not very colorful. The maps aren't exactly intuitive. They're very technical. They get the job done, but they're hard to access for the common folk. And that's generally who I'm catering towards, as long as with the professional crowd. But meteorology on TV has been, for 30 years. Mom, Pa Kettle and Matt Mabel have all been watching the evening newscast at 6 o'clock to watch the weather, and they see the graphics. They're comfortable with them. They understand what the radar is. They can watch the simulated radar. They know what the temperatures are. So I don't think we should ever discount the level of knowledge that the average consumer, the average TV viewer has. So you take the next step. Now you have people that have computer abilities. They're savvy in that they want to seek out information. They want to just consume vast amounts of data, or as I'd say it is probably ESPN fantasy sports and fantasy sports leagues, where it's just data is just so important to folks. And it's not only a nerd quality, but I think it's just a basic wanting, or a basic yearning to understand how that forecast is made. And it's not that they don't trust the meteorologist, but they feel like they should be able to see just where's this coming from. I want to understand why. And growing up, I remember watching Tom Skilling out of WGN, because that was a national network that we got in northern Michigan. And he would go through 50 maps in 4 minutes. I think he still does. But he was doing some pretty high-level stuff. And at the time then, I was watching the tropical meteorologists, watching John Hope and Cantori, at 50 minutes past the hour. And that's where we started to see, the satellite animations. We didn't exactly see the spaghetti at that point, but we started to get more of a description about why the forecast was being made the way it was. So the meteorologist had to start justifying it. And a lot of this is done underneath the hood, as you mentioned, but with computing technology, internet, and fast internet, where you can now loop these images very fast. And not only can you loop them on your laptop or your desktop, but now you can loop them on your phone. You have instant access to just a wealth of information that 10 years ago you just couldn't access. It was just too slow. It was too much of an effort. And the key for me, especially with social media, is to make the maps pretty and easily shared on Twitter. I think that was, having animated GIFs, for instance, on Twitter. I wondered why they didn't do that 3 years ago. So there's various aspects of the enterprise that I think the public is going to see more and more of, and I think we should encourage it. We should educate the public. We should explain the maps. And I'm encouraged by the fact that when there's somebody, a kid, or somebody with a nefarious agenda, puts up, a 50-inch snowfall from a 10-day model over the Northeast in order to incite panic. Most folks know that that's just a forecast. It's not going to happen. So I don't think we should sell the public short on their intelligence. And they, I think, have it in the back of their mind that the forecast could change tomorrow anyway. They essentially won't know until the morning what they should dress. A lot of folks just watch the morning news and they figure out what to dress from, at 7:15, that's when they figure it out. So going forward, I think meteorology is well positioned to become more of a fantasy sport type of data consumption and stats consumption. And we definitely see that, I think, more with many smaller companies in the meteorology enterprise. I wouldn't say we're seeing that with the Weather Channel. They're taking more of a BuzzFeed model. So there's definitely, I think, a huge opportunity and a void in the weather space right now to go forward and provide not only the forecast, but more of the why. And the Weather Service has always been doing this, but their discussions are in capital letters. There's a lot of abbreviations. They're very difficult to read to a common person. Just getting that type of information out to the public, add some maps, and I think it's lickety-split. You've got a very good value-added product going forward.
Hey, Ryan, can I ask you a question real quick?
Yeah, sure.
You're making a really good point about educating the public on the maps that you make, making them easier to read so that the public can pretty much conceive that a monumental event like a 50-inch snow is something that they shouldn't take seriously. And you had made the point that most of the public knows that that's not correct, that there's something wrong with that. In my experience, working social media for my own individual office, I would disagree with that. The majority of the really alarmist type of things that we see are heavily used and are heavily believed to the point where we're having to answer questions for whoever makes that, trying to address them. And I think part of it is, on the social science standpoint, people are inclined to believe things that are very scary. I mean, we look at news all the time, and we are programmed to be alert by things that are going to be into the world. And when stuff like that occurs, I think people really do think that that's the way that they've heard news all the time. It must be something serious. And I think the dangerous part is that, and Rick alluded to it, was that kind of stuff is becoming popular. It's becoming something that you see more often than not. And if this data is available all over the place, then how do you feel about people that aren't so ethically putting it together and going through the amount of work that you're doing with it, and the amount of ethics and the amount of discipline that you do in order to get the right product and make it useful for the public? How do you feel about other people getting their hands on something like that?
Well, the data is free. I think the data should be open. The marketplace will determine who is considered an expert. We don't need a government license. We don't need some sort of policing agent in order to determine what data we can access and share. What's going to end up happening is it's folks like you in the Weather Service that's your job. That's the TV meteorologist's job. They're the ones that are going to have to go through the static and provide the value added as well, because nobody else is going to do it. The social media is never going to police itself. So what's going to end up happening, and I think it's happening now, is that people will end up seeking out authority, trusted sources. And that's why it's, I think, extremely important that TV stations, when they do their advertising, that they say that we're the #1 trusted weather resource, in the area, for instance. So I watched a presentation about where did people get their information during the Georgia snowpocalypse, where the city was just, was halted. I think it was Winter Storm Pax. And most of the people just got their information from local TV and the Weather Channel, for instance, somewhat social media. But that was for warnings. That's warning information. What's different about social media, and as you said, it's about what's going to happen in the future 5 to 10 days from now. It's that, holy crap, a huge snowstorm is coming. We're all gonna be buried. But that's 5 to 10 days from now. Now, that may get a lot of publicity. That's hype-worthy, but I think the folks, the average person knows, I think by now, that a 5 to 10 day forecast it's not gospel. It's not going to pan out. It's probably going to change, and the public, I think, is conditioned to know that. But I feel that it's the human meteorologist's job, and it's their responsibility, and it's an opportunity going forward to where they have to provide the value added. They have to sift through the data, because it's always going to be out there. You're never going to be able to stop it. If I took down my website, tomorrow a new one would pop up. Or Weather Service would do it themselves. There's nothing stopping them from putting out their own maps. So I think from the Weather Service point of view, the infographics that folks are doing now, where you highlight the uncertainties, but you nail with bullet points what you think is going to happen. And in terms of warnings, that's stuff that's going to happen within the next day or two. SPC puts out their risks for days 1 and the days 3, for instance. I feel like there's not going to be very much of a push, and for instance, say the National Hurricane Center. I don't know what the reception and the verification is going to be for their 5-day Genesis skill scores, for instance. But going out into the future, I think that's a place where in the 5 to 10 day range, we just don't have the skill, and the public, I think, still sees it as a lot of hype, which I think is good. I don't think we should sell the public short. And the folks that are abusing the system for, social media self-promotion, we all know who those people are. They're called out immediately, and but in the end, it's still publicity for these folks. It's publicity for the Weather Service. You guys are answering the phone. You're getting, social media clicks. You're getting website clicks. For TV stations, you're getting viewers. So all this hype, I don't understand how all this hype is bad for business. It's not bad for business. It's bad for, it's bad for meteorology as a whole, in that people aren't, I want to say meteorology takes a hit because it seems like there's just, kids can do this. They can pick model maps off the air or off the internet, just post them and make conclusions. So I think it takes away from meteorology as a science and as a high-level science, which it is on the back end, and it trivializes, all the efforts and the technology that goes into it. So I think going forward, we're going to probably see this as during the next winter, and say when the next polar vortex comes along, you're going to see the social media engine hype up.
Sorry. We have some automatic buzzers, and you just triggered one with that word. I'm sorry.
We're going to trigger it a bunch in a minute. So.
Hey, Ryan, did you ever think your maps would be so popular? I mean, I see these things all over the place, Jason and those guys use it at the Washington Post. The minute I saw them, I changed from the Weather Service maps to your maps whenever they were introduced a year or two ago. I mean, they are all over the place. Did you ever think they'd be so popular?
I don't know about how popular they are. I mean, in terms of actual clicks and views, 99% of the maps just get deleted. It's there's only a certain number of subset that people look at on a day-to-day basis, but it's easier for me just to make them all rather than have 100 computers stand on standby making them on demand. But it's clearly the colors. That's all it is. It's just pretty colors in terms of most of the weather maps. And the ability to see them animated or mouse over, either JavaScript mouse over, animated GIFs. And my website that I built, I didn't spend much time building the website from scratch. I bought the theme from themeforest.com for $10, and then just you adjust the HTML. That's how you do a website usually from scratch now. And I made it as simple as possible in a table of contents format, with the expectation that it turned into an app immediately. But there's not much money in an app. There's not much money in giving stuff away for free. And there's no way that the maps could survive on an ad-supported way. So the subscribers are critical to keep the lights on and to keep the product going. So I thank the subscribers, and the usage by, I think, media, since we have an advertising budget of 0, social media has allowed the maps to infiltrate where if you go Google image search or you do a media search, the maps tend to show up just because they're the most colorful and they're easiest to tell the story. And the fact that on Twitter, I'm doing 90% of the work for those journalists. I'm tweeting out what the map says, what's the several tweets, and I'm essentially doing all the work ready for them. So
are you having any piracy issues, or people take maps that aren't paying for them and using them?
No, it's been locked down. You can't access it without the subscription. I mean, there's instances where people share their passwords or their usernames, but those folks weren't going to pay anyway. And I remember at one time when I was a poor graduate student, I don't begrudge them folks from using the maps. I mean, it's not like that doesn't injure me at all. It's not really taken away from us. The problems is when folks that are consultants, or they have their own website with a paywall, for instance, and they use those for third-party consultation, for instance. Then you get into a little bit of hazy points, because we can't put the ECMWF products on the internet for free. We can't put them on the open internet without paying an additional fee, which I think is an additional $50,000 right now if I wanted to post an ECMWF image free to the internet. So that's where I kind of take more interest in the licensing and the piracy issues. But in reality, very few instances where we have to really crack down on somebody. Almost all the subscribers.
Call Moose and Rocco the bouncers. Hey, one more question, and I'll Bill pick it back up. How are you getting along with Bastardi and DeLeo? You guys get along pretty well?
I don't have to do much of the forecasting. That's for one thing. I mean, those guys are absolute experts when it comes to long-range forecasting, energy, and agriculture. So, and in tropical too. I mean, while we may have disagreements on what the storm is going to do or not, Joe makes some pretty compelling cases to why he's right, and he's been right too many times for me to question him about silly things. So, in terms of, I think, long-range forecasting, Joe and Joe just have it nailed. They've had some big wins lately, and I mean, everybody has big losses. But as long as you're batting, I think, above 500 when it comes to long-range forecasting, your people will pay you for your information. Joe Bastardi's background obviously is at AccuWeather, and Joe DeLeo's is at the Weather Channel, or WSI. So they've seen commercial meteorology at the big guys, for the last 3 decades, and I think it does say something a little bit that they take the risk to do it on their own, that they take the risk to give up a guaranteed salary in order to start a company from scratch, and just them two as forecasters, and somebody to push buttons on the computer and send out the emails. So I think that's a big risk that they took, and they also took a big risk, obviously, in bringing me on. But we work very well as a team together, and the fact that we're all remotely scattered around the country, we just do a lot of our, well, we do all of our work through Skype. So just like this Hangout, we're doing Skype consultations, once a week or more often in order to coordinate. I think it's a dream job. I mean, I can't think of anything else that I could want to do. Except sit at home and spend time doing meteorology and finding what I think is interesting in the world in terms of meteorology and tweet about it, or try to create new graphics or new products. It's hard for me to come up with something better to do at this point.
Yeah. Now, Ryan, talk for a moment about ACE, what it is, and how you got heavily interested in it, and what that information that you've learned over the years in your research tells you about trends and tropical cyclone frequency around the globe.
Well, ACE, accumulated cyclone energy, is just the wind speed squared, and you add that up every 6 hours during the storm's life cycle. So when you start looking at a bunch of storms, Atlantic storms and typhoons, you start to get a sense of what is a big storm, what is a high ACE storm. And then you start looking at seasons, and you put those together, and you start looking at the numbers, and you say that the Atlantic has an average ACE of 100 for a season. Well, an active season may be 200, and an inactive season might be 30. Well, once you have those numbers, and it's just an easy way to boil down the hurricane activity during a year, then you start looking at what's happening with El Nino, what's happening with the PDO, the AMO. And you can then start doing a little bit of, during ENSO years, El Nino years, ACE is very low in the Atlantic, and it's very high in the North Pacific, for instance, or in the Southern Hemisphere. So, so there's a research value underneath the hood for that, but it's also it's another meteorology number. It's another statistic to keep track of, and it's important, I think, also for determining how active a year is compared to the past, and then looking at the year-to-year trends. In meteorology, there's a few unanswered questions that are sort of the research holy grail. One of them is clouds and turbulence. Another one is, why are there only 80 to 90 tropical cyclones around the world each year? Why aren't there 800? Why aren't there 8? What are the tropical cyclones actually doing for the climate, and why are there 80 to 90 each year? We don't really have a good understanding or answer for that. So ACE is one of those metrics that also remains relatively constant, and for the last 30, 40, 50 years, as far as we have good data going back. So you start looking at the wiggles up and down from year to year. You can pick out the ENSO cycles for global ACE, for instance. You can pick out the active period in the Atlantic when the AMO changed to a warm phase. You can also pick out the periods in the West Pacific when the PDO flipped from a warm to a cold phase. So ACE is a good climate indicator, as it's called. NOAA uses it as a climate a signal as well, and it's just something that I like to keep track of. And it was an easy thing to publish because back in 2004 and 5, after Hurricane Katrina, that was really the first time that folks had taken, like Kerry Emanuel, Trenberth, Peter Webster, and Judy Curry at Georgia Tech, where they took the best track data set, which is the HERDAT, but they also took the other data sets from around the world, and they started performing trend analysis on them. And obviously that opened up another can of worms about the data quality going forward, but it definitely tells you about the importance of hurricane activity in the climate change puzzle. And it's something definitely you should look at as one metric. It's not the be-all, end-all, but I think it's useful for giving you indication about how active a season is. So if you go to the website right now and you look at ACE on the Weatherbell website, if you look at the ACE, we're almost exactly average for the entire globe this year, year to date. It couldn't get any more average. So That's in contrast over the last several years. It's been actually very quiet around the world, globally, in terms of tropical cyclone activity, except for various storms, Haiyan in the Philippines, and various recent ones that we've had. It could be a heck of a lot worse. I mean, we could have the 1950s in the Atlantic again, or we could have 1997 in the West Pacific, where not only was there one super typhoon going, there was 3 or 4 going. It's like taking the Canadian model on steroids. I mean, we have not had meteorology models that have had to forecast that. I mean, GFS, obviously it was around as, let's say it was around as AVN back in 1990s. And in 2004 and 5, GFS was, it wasn't as skillful as it was now. Neither was the European model. So our global models have not had to deal with many of the hurricane forecast challenges that we've had in the past. So I think there's still questions about how these hurricane models are going to perform going forward and in real time. I think there's still going to be a lot of curveballs and sketchy forecasts, just like we saw with Sandy. I mean, there's still going to be blown forecasts going forward. So if we have some indication about what happened in the past, definitely can give us some help in determining the future. I'd like to know ahead of time if the Atlantic is going to be super active. Doesn't look like it's going to be this year, which gets into another avenue of thought that maybe the active period in the Atlantic is over with. That this is it. We're going back down to eventually the typical pre-1995 activity. It's good news for some. Might not actually be good news for the East Coast, but we're now reaching almost 10 years without a United States major hurricane landfall. That's a favorite, global warming skeptic point to point out. So it's been a while.
We're going to ask for a temporary suspension of the buzzer, Mr. Host, for a moment. But talk for a moment.
I'll turn it off.
I like it.
Talk for a moment, Ryan, about you had a post on the WhatsApp blog a couple of years ago about weather amnesia.
Yeah, that was spurred by Judy Curry, who's had her blog now I think for 4 or 5 years. That what if we actually had the weather of the 1950s and we just replayed it this year or this decade? I mean, it would be hell. And part of that was, what if we had the drought of the 1970s in California? Well, now we do. So there's always been climate hardship, as it's called. There's always been really bad times to be alive in certain parts of the world in terms of the weather. The key is now that we'll be able to handle it much better, or we should be able to, here in the first world, but other parts of the world are still in the same boat as they were 30, 40, 50 years ago. It's about disaster cleanup rather than disaster prevention. It's very hard to take that prevention that we have here and all the computer technology and translate that to, say, to Bangladesh. So part of the weather amnesia is in the media, in that journalists are, maybe they're not of an age where they remember when the winters were this bad, or when temperatures were this cold or hot, for instance. So in the back of media's mind, everything that happens now seems like it's unprecedented. It's an extreme event that's never happened before. That's clearly false, because you can always go back into history and find something that's happened similarly or a very similar situation. I mean, weather tends to repeat itself. It's very rare that something happens that we've never seen before. The only reason why we haven't maybe seen it before is because we haven't been alive long enough, or we haven't measured it. So I think weather amnesia actually probably starts in about 1979, and that's the beginning of the satellite era. And one of the favorite climate indicators is Arctic sea ice, and it's like we have no idea what happened with Arctic sea ice prior to 1979, because we didn't have the polar orbiting satellites in order to view it. So all of our trend lines start in the 1970s, and from a climate point of view, that was a cold time period globally, and then we went through the period of global warming until the 1990s, and now it's plateaued, or we're in a pause or a hiatus or whatever. So this climate that we have right now, where global temperatures are relatively stable, I think is technically a fairly stable climate. We're sort of stuck. We haven't had any strong La Niñas. Well, we had, but we haven't had a strong El Nino in 20 years. So we haven't really seen in the social media age, or in the, in this century, for instance, we haven't really seen what Mother Nature can really produce. I mean, we saw with 04 and 05 hurricane seasons, but now we're 10 years since then, and we haven't seen much since. So we don't want a repeat of that. We don't want a repeat of the 1930s Dust Bowl. We've learned from that. We should have learned from the 1970s California droughts in terms of reservoir building and water retention and drought management. There shouldn't be anybody surprised by this happening now. And that's the key, is that we shouldn't be surprised when bad weather happens, or we enter a time period of climate where we're going to have issues with drought, flooding, for instance. I mean, all this, as meteorologists and as climatologists, we have access to the history book or the record book. Or the almanac. We should be able to see a lot of this stuff coming. And unfortunately, we tend to let our guard down. People forget. They need to constantly be reminded. But once you start reminding them and beating them on the head with it, then they tune you out. So you have to balance both of those.
So Ryan, one other buzzer-ready question here tonight. Nate left it before he sacked in for the night. He said, climate change overall. You got into a bit of a rant this afternoon, and of course Joe has made his opinion on AGW well known. So what are your thoughts on climate change science, and why, and what should we as scientists be doing about it?
Let me handle the first one. What should scientists be doing about it? Scientists should be doing the research in order to help the policymakers to make the most informed decisions. I think that's pretty obvious. I don't have a problem, for me personally, I don't have a problem if a scientist wants to get political. I just don't want them to hide the fact that they're being political. I don't want stealth advocates. I don't want certain scientists to be hiding their opinions behind this veil of being a scientist or a cleric, standing on the mountaintop, using their moral and scientific authority to suggest what the rest of society should do. Here in the United States, in a democracy, we have the ability to take all sorts of different information. And even if it's something that we should do, we still, as a free people, have the choice not to do it. And at the moment, the climate change policy that we are following right now in the United States is we're choosing to do nothing. And that's still a choice. And that's something that the climate change advocates, from a political policy point of view, are trying to change. And that they're trying to take that away as a choice, where do nothing is not an option. So that's sort of that's done in politics with many different issues. Like, we must act, we must do something. And part of that is good intentions. The doing something part may lead to a beneficial result. But also, it's possible doing nothing is the best option at this point. So I sort of fall into this agnostic camp, where policy-wise, I don't think we should be making rash decisions about changing our energy industry, for instance. Because even though the science tells us that the planet is warmed, I have no doubt about that. I definitely buy the CO2 argument. So I'm not exactly a global warming denier. I'm just agnostic about the policy prescriptions that not only politicians want to put into place, but scientists want to put into place as well. Because I'm coming from the conservative side of the aisle. Scientists are almost exclusively on the liberal side of the aisle. That even regardless of climate change, they would favor those policies anyway. So that's my rub, is that I want to be able to differentiate between a scientist telling me to pursue a certain policy and the science itself. So it's hard maybe to keep those two separate in this day and age, but there's some scientists that do it a very, very good job, where they're the ones that are called in front of Congress to testify, and they maintain credibility and trust. Other scientists, global warming scientists, they're out on the campaign trail, campaigning for governor in other states. So I think there's definitely not just a fine line, but there's a pretty thick line between a scientist and an advocate. And right now, I'm not an advocate for anything. I'm a sort of an equal opportunity, I want to say a mocker, mock stupid stuff on Twitter, because a lot of the global warming stories in the media are, very low level, very, as I called it today, AMS glossary type of, or Google level type of scholarship. I mean, they're just intellectually vapid. There's not much there. That's where, again, the media and the new, as you call it, the explainer media, which is like Vox.com, Mashable, BuzzFeed, and all them, they're trying to become more of wonks, nerds, when it comes to media. Global warming fits right in that, because now you're explaining something very scientifically high level, and you're also prescribing a policy solution. So that's just like the absolute, just perfect situation, perfect recipe to get people to tell you to do something. And at this moment, I'm not right now convinced that doing nothing maybe isn't perhaps the best option, but it should be considered an option. And there should be a debate. Debate's not over type of thing. That's just a way for you to say, you should agree with me. You should do what I want to do. Stop talking. I think that's definitely an issue with the climate change crowd, is that there's not a lot of talking across the aisle, and I'm not convinced there's a lot of talking amongst themselves either. And I think there's a lot of people that are on parallel trajectories, and sometimes they're at odds with each other. Scientists tend to talk across each other. Professors, academics, there's a lot of self-promotion that goes on, and it's very important for your career, it's important for your funding, it's important for your students going forward, that everybody has jobs, for instance. So it's a different culture. A lot of the public doesn't get to see that on a daily basis, and if they do get to see it, they see sort of a negative view of what academia and university culture is. But whenever that's put on display in the context of climate change, it just, for the public, it just is, they tune it out. They just don't want to hear about some egghead professor telling them to turn off their light bulb or, drive a Prius. They just don't want to hear it. And that's just the key here in the United States. It's unique in the world in that the support for global warming policy is just, it's so low. The people don't care as an issue. It's not a voting issue. It's a, I guess that summarizes my views.
Hey, let me throw in one thing real quick here, and we got to hit a recorded segment before I start the 10 o'clock news next door. And this goes for both sides. Do you find it odd, Ryan, that you've got some high-level professors, those in the academic world that are hanging out on Twitter, firing off horrible insults and attacks on others in the academic world because they disagree with their opinion on climate? Do you find that odd, this behavior?
It's unseemly behavior for sure, but it's personal between those people. I mean, they're talking to each other through a public forum, like a public bulletin board is what Twitter is, for everybody to see it. That is just the most, I want to say it's a narcissistic way to do it, but it's not only are you telling that Professor A has a gripe with Professor B, that usually that would be hammered out at conferences, that would be hammered out on private email or private email lists, but now it's done in public. And that's a way for the professors to settle scores. They have axes to grind, and it's a way to show their colleagues that they're supporting or they're against a certain person. So in the end, it's all self-promotion. It's a way for them to gain visibility and stature, and that's the most important thing for a a professor on Twitter. That's the most important thing, is for publicity, because there's very few, there's exceptions, but there's very few that I follow, that I know of, that their first job on Twitter is to be an educator. And for me, that's, I think, a professor's first job should be an educator. But I'm not blind to the fact, going through 7 years of grad school at Florida State. I saw the whole spectrum. I saw professors that didn't care, and some that it cared, maybe too much about their students, and they let other parts of their job fall through the cracks. So I think it's definitely on Twitter. It opens you up to slander and libel issues. It opens you up to lawsuits, and you have to be very careful of what you say, because you're maybe hurting somebody's ability to get a grant. You're affecting their livelihood, their job. So my simplest policy is that I don't criticize another academic by name or in general. It does me no good. And in general, they don't criticize me either. Either they blocked me already on Twitter, or we have civil conversations. So I think you can tell by those folks who they follow on Twitter. Is it an echo chamber? Do they interact with other folks with different viewpoints? Or, as you said, do they just call everybody a denier, or they slime and just throw childish insults? So that's essentially what they are. It's just childish insults, and it doesn't help anybody. You wouldn't say that stuff in a classroom or a professional setting. And if you were in an AMS meeting or an AGU meeting, you'd be thrown out on your fanny if you talk that way. It's unprofessional.
All right, well, let's take a break, fellas. We're going to roll Professor Peters with WeatherBrains 101. And, Bill, you'll have to host the show for the rest of this, because I have to walk across the hall, do some television, and put on some TV duds here. So we will be right back. It's a great conversation with Dr. Ryan Maui, so stay with us. We got a lot more to go as WeatherBrains rolls along.
WeatherBrains 101 with Professor Peters.
Various models abound in the world of weather, including one designed to predict storm surge from landfalling hurricanes. The model name has nothing to do with drinking. Rather, SLOSH stands for Sea, Lake, and Overland Surges from Hurricanes. This model is the numerical model developed by the National Weather Service to estimate storm surge heights resulting from historical, hypothetical, or predicted hurricanes by taking into account the atmospheric pressure, size, forward speed, and track data of a hurricane or tropical storm. SLOSH has been applied to the U.S. East Coast as well as the Gulf of Mexico coastlines. In addition, coverage extends to Hawaii, Guam, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Based on tide gauge observations and high water marks from past hurricanes, the SLOSH model is accurate to within about plus or minus 20%. However, there is considerable error in the high water mark data. If you use higher quality, or what's considered to be excellent high water mark data from Katrina, the SLOSH accuracy can be improved and approached as much as plus or minus 5%. The SLOSH model consists of a set of equations derived from the Newtonian equations of motion, or shallow water equations, and the continuity equation applied to a rotating fluid with a free surface. The equations are integrated from the seafloor to the surface. The coastline is represented as a physical boundary. Subgrid scale water features, things like cuts, chokes, sills and channels, and vertical obstructions such as levees, roads, and spoil banks are parameterized. The model accounts for astronomical tides by specifying an initial tide level, but does not include rainfall amounts, river flow, or wind-driven waves. At the time emergency managers must make an evacuation decision, errors in the hurricane's track and characteristics can still be large. To aid emergency managers in planning for hurricanes, the potential surge for an area is computed. This is done by running SLOSH with hypothetical hurricanes with various landfall directions and locations. Saffir-Simpson scale categories, forward speed, size, and tide levels. Each individual run generates an envelope of high water containing the maximum value a grid cell attains during that particular run of the SLOSH model. These envelopes are then combined by taking the maximum by category, speed, and direction to create meows, or maximum envelopes of water, or simply by category to create MOMS, maximum of meows. The meows and MOMS form the basis of the hazard analysis portion of coastal hurricane evacuation plans. SLOSH, an important tool in providing decision makers with good information.
Well, thanks to our internationally beloved meteorologist, Brian Peters, for that. Ryan, any comments on the SLOSH model? Anything we'll see on Weatherbell anytime soon?
I can put it on there for sure. The issue with Slosh is that it's a sort of a warning model that's real time, and I don't want to become a source of warning information where it's a 24/7 death or disaster type of product. That's not what I want to get involved in. I always say that go to the Weather Service or your local TV station. Don't come to me for hurricane evacuation orders, unless it's Mayor Bloomberg saying something just totally obnoxious in a press conference, for instance. But that's not our role at Weatherbell. Under the hood is not being a 24/7 meteorology outfit. That may change in the future, but at this point, there's not enough hours in the day to do that. I know NSEP is doing an extratropical surge forecast model, and I think there's a Gulf of Mexico one that's at higher resolution that they're testing right now. But honestly, there hasn't been much of a hurricane activity to make use of them lately.
Mm-hmm. And let's keep it that way. I noticed on the web something that said that mesoscale modeling of explosively intensifying warm seclusion extratropical cyclones was a specialty of yours, Ryan. Does that lead to a discussion of Sandy?
Yeah, Sandy was what was described as sort of a warm core seclusion system. That's just a fancy way of saying it was more extratropical. But an extratropical system, when it's in its mature state, has a warm core. It's not formed in the same way a hurricane's warm core is formed, but it's definitely much warmer in there. It might be many degrees warmer at 850 millibars than it is in the center than it is on the outside. And that's just how the fronts end up backing around and trapping this area of warmer air that had existed ahead of the front, and it traps it and puts it at the center. And that's typically why with snowstorms, nor'easters, they tend to have eyes or warm, cloud-free features as it goes up to the coast and it's at its maximum intensity or its lowest pressure. So over the global oceans, these extratropical cyclones, they occur 50 to 100 per year, depending upon how active the jet is and where the entrance and exit regions are the most active. And these guys are out there doing their job. They're transporting momentum, moisture, and heat poleward, and moving things around, keeping the energy balance of the Earth in check. And without them, without extratropical cyclones, not only meteorology would be quite boring, but you'd actually be able to forecast much, much further into the future. There would be long-term forecasts would be easy because when you have a block, for instance, that sets up, forecasting the initiation of the block and the destruction of the block is very hard. And that was the case with Sandy, where it was very hard to determine where that block was actually going to be placed and how strong it was going to be, especially now when you have a system coming up from the south that's going to interact with it. But once the block is in place, it's a very easy forecast. Once you have that, it's not moving. And when stuff doesn't move in meteorology and on the globe, it's pretty easy to just do persistence forecasting, even from a computer model's point of view. It's when the dynamics happen, when there's convection and there's situations where moist convection is obviously one of the hardest things to model. And we're not actually modeling it, we're sort of parameterizing it. We're guessing empirically what it's going to do to the atmosphere. And then the model handles that. It moves the mass around. It's supposed to maintain and conserve the mass, but it moves it around. And at the resolution of the model, it tends to succeed and fail at different things. For instance, you need to have a very high resolution model to resolve the inner workings of a hurricane. But even at 4 kilometer resolution, let's say at HWRF, you can't get those eye wall mesovortex. So rapid intensity forecasts are probably going to be still many years down the road. So in terms of extratropical forecasting, that was my dissertation topic, but in general, anything that's extreme is actually what weather is, something that's exciting. And I tended to flock towards those storms and to understand climatologically and from a synoptic dynamic point of view what made them tick. And it was awesome because we had a lot of data sets that just came online in the early 2000s and 2005 and 2006 so-called reanalysis data sets, which are taking an operational weather model and running it sort of in historical mode, where you take all the observations that were available in the 1970s or 1980s, 90s, and as satellite data came online, you get more and more information. And you run the model as if it existed in the 1990s. And you take the analysis at each point, and you save that. And then that way you can do sort of more climatological studies with gridded data. And with the GRADS program, it's very, very easy to solve large problems and handle and tackle large questions. And I think that's a lot of good research projects, graduate theses, I think going forward are going to be dealing with that, not only with the reanalysis data sets, but also with the new global warming CMIP5 climate model ensembles, where now you have 90 different climate models and umpteen ensembles, and they're run for various scenarios going forward. It can help you understand a lot about the climate of current climate and of past climate, and of course with the future climate. So depending on where the person is most interested, either in school or a researcher, it's a lot of folks that don't care about the past. It doesn't interest them to understand and study that. They want to go out to the horizon. They want to study what's going to happen in a future climate. So there's also a lot of folks that sort of do extraterrestrial meteorology as well, and that's sort of where I find climate forecasting sometimes is just you're forecasting for a different planet. So.
Well, Ryan, we've been educating and entertaining weather weenies since 2004 or 5 here on WeatherBrains, and I have to say tonight is probably one of the most, if not the most, educational show we ever had. We appreciate that very much.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Now, Ryan, you're welcome. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
I'm happy to answer any questions on Twitter ever or send an email. I'm usually fairly responsive. I love interacting on Twitter. I think Facebook's a waste of time for meteorology. I think most of the community has figured that out by now, just because of, why do you want to promote a weather warning, for instance? But I think Twitter for now, in its current state, I think is perfect for meteorology, and I'd encourage anybody and everybody to have an account and follow folks like us, who are going to be providing, let's say, 90% meteorology and then 10% other, and find other similar folks that have that similar balance in their tweeting habits. Don't. A lot of people just sort of Twitter is just a sort of a, it's a waste of time for some folks. But I think there's definitely some very valuable things that you can find on there.
Well, Ryan, we would love to invite you to stay till the end, but you've given us 90 minutes, so if you need to bow out, we'll understand that completely. Would you like to stay, or do you need to go?
I need to go.
Well, good. Well, how can folks follow you on Twitter, and how can they access the Weatherbell site?
My username at Twitter is @RyanMaui. Very creative. It's just my name. And weatherbell.com, and it's more specifically the models at weatherbell.com. It's a subscription service. You can sign up for free. If you don't want to give your credit card, contact me. I can hook you up. I think it's a great way to get involved in the under the hood parts of meteorology that you don't get to see sort of on a daily basis, and you can become essentially your own forecaster at home. If you don't like how we're doing, then by all means you can do it yourself and do a better job. And the market's wide open. If you can do a better job, then you'll be rewarded for that.
Well, Ryan, maybe Rick or I will see you on the other sideline at a national championship game to come next January.
Yes, sir.
And maybe you too, Trevor. You never know. Texas Tech might show up in that game too.
I was about to say, you're going to count out Tech just like that.
That was not very nice. But thank you again, Ryan. I'm so glad we got to do this.
Appreciate it. Night, folks.
All right.
Thanks, Ryan.
See you later.
Thanks, Ryan.
Well, that was a fantastic discussion, guys. I really enjoyed it. I hate that it came up against the Sharknado, so I guess you, Rick, and Trevor, you've been watching the Twitter feed over there. Has it been going a little crazy?
I haven't seen it stop, to be honest. In fact, it's kind of funny that the National NWS page asked whether or not a Sharknado would be possible. So I can only imagine how much traffic they're getting in response to that. A couple of the other local offices that had Sharknado posts too.
Oh,
so
my goodness.
Must be a slow evening.
It's crazy.
I guess.
I applaud the people. Like, I've seen some different Weather Service offices and Red Cross, and trying to capitalize on it and say, hey, Sharknadoes aren't real, but this disaster is, and get ready. I think that's cool. And gosh, I think it's just because I follow so many weather people. That's all that's out there tonight is Sharknado.
Absolutely.
Well, I guess we were overshadowed, but we had our own show over here, and I tell you, Ryan Maui was great. And I knew he would be. It took us a long time to finally get together and get him on, and it really was a fascinating conversation tonight.
Yeah, one of the things that, like, when you pursue meteorology, in grad school now, there's really a number of avenues that you can go, and what Ryan had done was basically none of what I pursued. So I was just sitting here going, okay, yeah, I think I remember having that class, but there's a lot of stuff in there. Man, I learned a lot in an hour that I don't think I had ever heard before. So it's really good learning about the intricacies of how to get that data, and how to use that to produce new products, and how you can improve upon products, and it's just what the computing power needed in order to do it. Just those things you don't really think about, every day. So really interesting stuff.
Well, now, Trevor, we, of course, wanted to have you on, not just to be a panelist, but to talk about some of the work you do. And I think it's very interesting that you have a passion for communicating weather information to people that are deaf or hard of hearing. Talk about your work in that area, how it came to be, and some of the things that you're doing. Well,
a lot of people don't know is that when I was pursuing meteorology at Texas Tech, they don't have an undergrad in meteorology. I had to get my undergraduate degree in geophysics. And then I got my atmospheric science degree as a master's. But when I was an undergrad, I minored in sign language and also deaf culture, which is all one big program. And I didn't have any idea that that would translate to what my eventual career would be. I just had a passion for it. I really liked the people. They're very expressive. I myself am pretty expressive, so I came to really like the culture, and I relate to them well. But when I was coming to Nashville, actually one of the first questions in my interview was, we see that you have background in sign language. And I was not prepared for that question. I was prepared for, well, okay, here's the setup, so what would you do, or something like that, but not the question about sign language. And so they said that, hey, we just had the flood, the Nashville flood of 2010, and one of the things that came out of that was that there were a number of our public here, the customers here, that were trying to get services, were trying to figure out what was going on, and there was nothing for us to give them alerts for. And it was really an eye-opening experience for our office to know that everything that we do, we sort of take for granted that just about every alarm system and alert system that we have requires your hearing in order to acknowledge it. If you think about a weather warning even on TV, it makes a sound. The emergency broadcast system makes a sound. These are things that we as hearing people take for granted all the time. And it's the problem isn't just alerting. It's also understanding the information that we give them is going to need to be looked over, even more so than it currently is. There's a lot of work going into social science about how our warnings are interpreted. But one thing that even that is starting to dive into is the different paradigms of people. And one of those paradigms is the deaf and hard of hearing. We try to express, for instance, here's a good analogy. If you try to explain to a deaf person what a rhyme is that has never heard anything before, how do you explain to a deaf person what a rhyme is? How would you do it?
Mm-hmm.
And
Exactly.
It's simple concepts like that that make us not really understand what we're doing when we say things. And it's not always bad, but one of the misconceptions that we've learned starting to be a part of a group called EARS, which is a coalition of different people, different organizations throughout Nashville, like the Emergency Management, Red Cross, and the Public Health Department. We're a member of that. And one of the things we learned was that, okay, so deaf people aren't, especially the ones that are born deaf, English is a second language to them. So if we're going to say things like severe thunderstorm warning or tornado warning, okay, but they're reading those words as a second language, so their understanding of them may be different than our understanding of them. Another great case in point that we talked about recently was the whole concept of when thunder roars, go indoors. that fundamentally is completely flawed for deaf and hard of hearing. Because first of all, it's a rhyme slogan which catches on to us, so it's easy to say, oh, it's hard to forget that for a hearing person. But then also, when thunder roars, is the thing that makes people understand that it's a danger. Think about when you were a kid and you heard a really, lightning strike that came right next to you, or somewhere close. You felt the thunder and you heard the thunder and it scared you. That's how you knew it was something to be afraid of. One of the very alarming things we heard of the other day was that, well, we don't hear that, so I'm not exactly sure how dangerous lightning is. People that will walk out into a thunderstorm with lightning coming all over the place and not consider it to be a danger because they've never experienced it. And so these hugely alarming things to our office and really the Weather Service in general was something that we just could not ignore anymore. And so from there, we were trying to figure out, okay, well, what can we do? I mean, every one of our alert systems it requires your hearing in some form or fashion. Do we start issuing things on Twitter and to point everybody to Twitter? Is that how that works? What do we do? And so when we invited some of the deaf participants to show up and to our committee, they were asking that not only did they not understand the weather threats, but they didn't understand what we do as a service, the whole meteorological service. They thought that the Weather Service was those people that are on TV, and that the job is the same thing, that you give us the information that we need, and I'll just look here on the screen. But they said, okay, well, when you guys break in live, the captioning that comes across covers up a lot of the pertinent information that we would need in order to take an action. And they said, how could you fix that? And that's something, as a weather service, I can't fix that. It's beyond our control. And so a lot of the problems that they said, well, if you fix this, this would work. If you fix that, that would work. And one of the things, a lot of those things we just couldn't control. So we started trying to figure out, what can we do? What is it that we can do for this demographic? And so the Metro Public Health Department, through this partnership, and this is really what I'm trying to drive home, is establishing partnerships amongst the community, because the Metro Health Department had a grant for special services and alert systems for people that are underserved. So it became apparent to us that, well, maybe we should try to figure out some accessible way of getting the weather alerts. And then we looked into some research and we came to find out that there are weather radios that have attachments with bed shakers and strobe lights. And those things are actually quite effective for getting the attention of people, especially when they're asleep, that do not use their hearing. And so we decided to pursue that, and then we were able to secure what we weren't, the Weather Service wasn't, but the group of ears were able to secure a grant for purchasing 250 radios with strobe lights and bed shakers. And those were given for free to the public in Nashville, the deaf household. We served 100 households radios with about 150 people total using them. And in that workshop that we hosted, it wasn't just giving away radios and here you go home now. It was learning how to put the emergency kit together, what to do if the radio goes off, what exactly does a severe thunderstorm mean, and spotter training. And spotter training was something that at first didn't make a lot of sense because you call in a report, but we really hit home the whole social media thing. We said you can submit reports in all these multimedia ways, and now it's been pretty overwhelming actually how much return that we got from that, how many more Facebook and Twitter reports that we got from people who are deaf that identify themselves as such because they want to be actively involved in the warning process. And it's one of those lights on type of things where you go, well, if they continue to be interacting with us, then they become more aware of the weather situation. And from there, we've taken a step forward in serving the public there by just simply being interested in what their needs are, providing some sort of service for them. And from there, the optimism and enthusiasm just skyrockets. And it's not just Nashville now. Now that workshop actually got national coverage from, I think, USA Today, I believe. And because of that, we've had requests from Montana, Ohio, Kentucky. There's a really good program with what Jennifer Schuler is doing down in, she's an intern at the Huntsville office. she's leading an entire statewide program, basically, on partnering with the Alabama Department of Rehabilitation Service. And their state coordinator is trying to get the entire state water trained. And it's amazing how it's taken off.
Well, congratulations, Trevor, on taking the initiative in such an inclusive program that could be actually promoting ambassadors in their own communities, from someone who might not even be able to use the information that we have now. That's really very intrepid. I admire you.
But it has not been easy. It's been about 3 years since the day I got there. This has been a project that's been ongoing, but I'm really proud to say that a lot of the other offices now are recognizing this and having the same aha moments. We just had a WCM in Memphis that gave a presentation to our little internal group of people that are doing outreach for the public, or for the deaf and hard hearing, and he said the same thing, and it reminded me of the same first presentation I gave, and he just said, "Oh, I didn't even think of that. I didn't consider this." And did you know that the deaf and hard of hearing talk during presentations? Did you know how loud it was during the presentation? Because they're chattering the entire time. Did you know that they don't think anything I say is funny until 10 seconds after I say it? That's because the interpreter is still trying to interpret what is being said to that person, and then by the time you hear crickets on a joke that you normally get laughed for, and then you go, okay, well that didn't go over, so I'm going to go to the next slide, and then everyone starts laughing. So it's really kind of off-putting as a presenter, but that's the kind of thing we're trying to educate other WCMs and other people that do outreach in the Weather Service to say, hey, be prepared for these things. This is how you can do it. It's really easy. Just all you got to do is ask. You ask the right people, and they'll have it set up for you. It's really not that hard.
Well, you left a good segue there for talking about the T-Spotter program. We've had David Drobny on before, but talk about that, because you were instrumental in the implementation of that, weren't you?
I was there from day one, pretty much. David and my WCM at the time, Tom Johnston, who just, congratulations, Tom, if you're watching, because he's now the NYC at Corpus Christi. But
he's watching Sharknado, but that's okay.
He's watching. You're probably right. But he was instrumental about reaching out to David. David was providing a service that we just could not ignore. It was one of those things where we found somebody who was doing an honest to goodness public service, somebody who is trying to relay information to us and give information from us to the public. And one of the things he definitely gets is that people want to see proof of things happening, and they want to have it over their heads. They want to forecast of something that's going on at their house. They're not so concerned with a warning that's happening in a different part of our CWA, a different part of the county even. They want to know whether or not that storm is relevant to them, and that's a service that he can provide because he provides nowcasting services on Twitter to that one individual county, and in his case too, and it confines his area. So essentially, he gets to echo all of our products, interpret those products, because he's been trained by us. Especially, he comes to the Weather Service office frequently. It's radar training. It's NWS chat ethics training. He's up on all the radar upgrades, all of those things. And because of that, he is somebody who is, I wouldn't say sanctioned, but he has our support. And when he's giving information to the public, he never tries to contradict anything that is being said. He said the Weather Service said this, so because they said this, do this, things like that. And it's pretty rare, actually. Maybe Rick could comment on this, but it's pretty rare to find people that are doing it and they're not trying to get any benefit out of it. All they're trying to do is provide a service and have transparent information back and forth. A lot of the Facebook pages that Ryan alluded to before, a lot of them like to hoard reports, and they like to say, if you come here to get this, and nobody's trying to do that, in order to make the public, make the reporting more transparent, more effective, is sharing that all over the place. It doesn't do anybody any good to only be able to find it in one spot. And he definitely grasped that. When it comes to implementing it at the Weather Service, this was kind of a wild idea to a number of forecasters within the office. Why do we trust this guy? Why, what is it about him makes us have to listen to him? And it was like, well, we vetted the process. It wasn't overnight. It wasn't something that just said, okay, that guy is going to be our guy. It was somebody who built trust over time, much like you would have to go over any sort of vetting process in order to become a trusted source. He's done his legwork in order to become a trusted source. And because of that, we can use his very popular following, even more so than our own Twitter page. He has more Twitter followers than we do in our own area. And because of that, he can effectively broadcast information and share information. He can give people what they want and do something that we can't do during a high-end event and answer every one of the questions that comes in. And I think Rick will be the first to tell you that there's just questions we just simply don't have the time to answer. And questions about whether or not something's going to happen in their backyard, even though their neighbor just tweeted the exact same question. You know, it's something that we just don't have the manpower and the ability to do, but him and his team have the ability to do that. And the really great benefit that we get is that they will quality control reports that we can use. So the T-Spotter is actually just a hashtag. It's all it is. Nothing all that important. But it's a place that all the reports go to, and then individuals that are trained like they will go through all of the reports, find out which ones are that we can issue a local storm report for, or is warning criteria or close to warning criteria, but is relevant to our warning process, and submit them to chat. So really what you're looking for when you're going through Twitter is quality reports. But that takes time to make sure that they're controlled. We don't have that problem when it comes to T-Spotter, because we know the reports that have come to us have already gone through that quality control, and they've already gone through the process in order to make sure that they are quality.
So Rick, any comments to add to what Trevor said?
Well, I applaud all the work that Trevor's been doing. We chatted off and on through email and some other things. I guess we just submitted an abstract for the AMS annual meeting today, thanks to Trevor's work, and we'll be hopefully either presenting or standing by a poster there in Phoenix next year and talking about this to more people. Hopefully, I don't see how that wouldn't be accepted. This is good stuff, and talking to people about this in the Weather Service, there are people that are confused by it, or people that are resistant, like Trevor said. Who is this person? Why do we trust this person? Or the other things people think this is something new. This is very much, there's a lot of parallels between this and what we've been doing with amateur radio in the office for decades, forever. I mean, that's why I'm in the Weather Service, is because I got hooked up with somebody at the Memphis office, and I was a ham, and I got to be the person that went in and as the net control station, and I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for that. And that's exactly what this is, just on using different technology. The VOS, the Virtual Operations Support Teams, are doing the same thing the amateur radio operators are doing. They're gathering, they're filtering, they're condensing, they're collating, consolidating, whatever you want to call it, and giving us the good stuff. And that saves the National Weather Service meteorologists an untold amount of work. And I think once more offices see the value of this, and I'm excited to keep getting the word out about it, I don't know why an office would not want to do this, because this is in a large part the answer to the question, oh my gosh, how in the world are we supposed to look through all those tweets and get the good stuff out? You don't have to. There are volunteers out there who will do that for you, and we work with a virtual operations support team that's headed by Lloyd Colston and John Butler. Lloyd Colston is the Altus, Oklahoma emergency manager, and we may have people watching for weather reports over Oklahoma and Texas who are in Oregon or New York or somewhere else. It could be a mom with 3 little kids in the living room, and she's monitoring Twitter, and she's giving direct support to the National Weather Service and to the community. So I think this is, why didn't we think of this sooner? And I think this is I think this could be the answer to this problem of drinking out of this fire hose of information during weather events.
Yeah, I certainly would agree with that. One of the biggest things, just social media altogether, from one office to another, the first question you get is, well, why would we look at Twitter? Isn't the majority of that stuff not going to be usable? It could be bad information. And it's not, that's a valid point. You're looking at mostly stuff you cannot use, especially during a high-end weather event. People just simply saying, it's raining here, it's thundering here. Those aren't reports, we can't use them, and it takes time to read through them. And so the ability for one person that's sitting there, or even 2 or 3 people that are working social media desk at an office, to go through all of the information that's being talked about, especially on a high-end type of event, like a Numerical tornado. Anything like that, you've got to imagine there's just going to be a plethora of data, and you're not going to be able to physically be able to weed out the information that you need. And with people, like you said, you don't necessarily even have to be at the event in order to be able to help here. You can monitor Twitter feeds from all over the world. So you can have people that are doing this job of going and finding, okay, well, this is being talked about here. Oh, hey, look, we have damage of a school or a hospital or something like that just got lost in the noise, and somebody was able to pull it out, give it to us, pertinent information. It does take some training. It does take a good process to go through in order to know what to look for. But if you put in that front-end work, it pays off forever. It pays off as long as that person's willing to do the service. Because now, that's one more set of eyes looking at all this data. And Rick said it really well. I mean, you don't really have to do anything at that point. You just have to take in the quality control report, assuming you have enough people to field it all. And so I agree. It's the future of how I think we do crowdsourcing altogether.
So Rick, will you be bringing up a VOST tomorrow in the Amarillo office, or are they already utilizing one?
I don't know that they're directly doing it yet. I know the Albuquerque office has been one of the leaders in this, as has the El Paso office, and I think Midland office is starting to get involved. So things are spreading. That's the way some of the best things happen in the Weather Service. Is it just starts at one or two offices and just kind of goes up from there. And I think that's what's happening with this. I think it's just going to take. I think it's really going to take some examples and some cases, and some people want to see. Okay, people want to see some proof. So if we could get some really good cases where this really did something, this really had an impact. I think that's what we're going to need. And the more offices that we get involved in it, we're bound to get something like that. And then it's much easier to sell it after that point.
Well, Rick, you and I look awfully sleepy, so we're at that important part of the night, sort of like, when you were a kid at a spend the night party and you realized it was 5 o'clock in the morning, and it's like, do we go to sleep for 2 hours, or do we just try to make it till sunrise? So, well, you guys vote for closing up with some picks of the week, or we want to hang around and see if we can outlast Span?
I'm pretty much done. If you are, I can hang as long as you want to, but yeah.
I take that as a motion that we get ready to have picks of the week. So we'll go around the digital mahogany table. We'll put you on the spot, Trevor. You've got about 1 minute and 15 seconds to come up with a pick. That can be a website, a journal article, a book, anything about weather. And Rick, I'll throw it to you. What's your pick of the week?
Well, my pick of the week is just something we touched on last week. I know, James, we didn't talk about it a lot, but this new Weather Channel program called Weather Geeks. I really want to emphasize that again. And I know when that first came out, there was a lot of social media traffic, and I don't think anybody was being mean or thought there was anything malicious going on, but they stole your idea, and that's just what WeatherBrains is. And this is not a competition. Weather Geeks is an awesome show. I'll have to admit I've watched the Weather Channel more in the past 2 Sundays than I have in a long, long time. Dr. Marshall Shepard is involved in this project, past president of the AMS, and it's a perfect complement to WeatherBrains. So if you have not caught the show, and I would encourage you to take a look. They did a really good one last week on social media with Jason Semenel from the Washington Post Capital Weather Gang. I don't know exactly what the topic is this week, but Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. Central Time, give it a shot. And it is, it's not us or them, it's both. I mean, I can see us in the future talking, that comes on Sunday, and we're here on Monday, and we can follow up and talk about some of the same stuff. So I just want to give that another plug. Have nothing to do with the show. I just think it's high-quality information. If you're into weather and if you're a weather geek, the show is named perfectly because it's for you. So that's my pick.
It's Face the Nation for weather folks. That's
there you go.
One way I heard it described. But, yeah, and I'm excited that Dr. Marshall Shepard will be on our show. Because of a Twitter interchange right after the show this week, Rick, and you participated in that, and he's going to be on August 25th, so I'm looking forward to him showing back up, because a long, long time ago, Dr. Shepard appeared on this show when he first became the AMS president, and of course he became a real friend of the show, and we count him as a real ally. So, a media outlet wrote and wanted, to have a, they probably wanted some inflammatory quote, when the Weather Geek show was announced, and James said anything that Marshall Shepard is involved with is going to be a great thing. So, anyway, well, my pick of the week is from researcher Michael Chenoweth's paper about a reassessment of historical Atlantic Basin tropical cyclone activity. A friend of the show, Dr. Lourdes Avalos, told me about it, and I read it, and I thought it was a cool paper. It's in one of the client science journals, and that'll be my pick of the week. And some guests that are coming up here in the future. Let's see if I can do that. I'll do that after Trevor. Trevor, why don't you go ahead with your pick while I pull this up real quick.
Okie doke. I guess my pick of the week would go back to what we started talking about with me is, advocating for the deaf and hard of hearing in the meteorological community. What we've been able to accomplish in 3 years is nothing, just the tip of the iceberg. And in order to get started, it's really quite simple. All you need to do is reach out to your community. And a lot of people may say, how exactly do I do that? Where would I find deaf people like me? If exactly you'd be right. But there's a good website called bridgesfordeafandhh.org. It's all one word, bridgesfordeafandhh.org. And it is a site for literally education and deaf advocacy. And it's where we started. It's a place that is considered to be a friendly location. People that are deaf, hard of hearing, deaf, blind, late deaf, and what have you. And they provide this kind of information. It's a perfect partner for giving outreach of any type of training out to the deaf and hard of hearing. They know how to get interpreters. They know where to find the people. They know what the community wants, what they've asked for. It's a great place to start. So if you are interested in reaching out to the deaf and hard of hearing community, try going to those community centers like Bridges. And if you don't know where to start, you can also go to HLAA.org.
Well, that's a fantastic pick, and of course all these picks will be up on the WeatherBrains website. Well, any new business to bring before this august group tonight? Rick Smith, anything? Did I lose you?
Is Mike is there? There you go.
I don't think so.
I'm sorry, I lost my bandwidth.
We have some exciting guests coming up the next few weeks, so we're looking forward to that.
Yeah, the one I'm looking forward to, Rick, is the old AM weather show. Joan Von Ahn, who is Joan. She hasn't retired yet from the Weather Service, has she?
No, she still works for the Weather Service in some capacity. I saw her at the WCM conference several weeks ago and saw the name tag and knew she looked familiar, and that's when I said, wow, the AM weather. You can never talk about AM weather too much. I think that had such an impact on a lot of us.
And back to its predecessor, Aviation Weather, which was a cool show that probably you remember too, Rick.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, that's one of the big shows that's coming up, and Rick is in charge of one of the other shows on the 18th, the week before Dr. Marshall Shepard. That's when Dave Brown from WMC in Memphis will be on. That's going to be a fun show. Next week, Nate will be in charge. I can't say the guest name still. Plotter Domasinski. That's a good attempt at it. He was responsible for a rain field experiment in North Carolina, and Rachel Witter with the Updraft app on the 11th. And then Dave, of course, on the 18th, and then we'll move right forward to Dr. Shepard and Joan Von Ahn right on the day after Labor Day. But, of course, we usually record this show on Monday nights. This one will be released into the wild this coming Monday night. We thank you, the few of you who joined us tonight, for just an incredible discussion with Dr. Ryan Maui and with Trevor Boucher. Thank you for being here tonight. You can, of course, follow us on Twitter. You can email us at email@weatherbrains.com, and that reaches all the panelists and generally gets read when we have Aubrey or when Rick feels especially gratuitous. We love iTunes and Stitcher comments, and please leave us a listener survey on our website at weatherbrains.com. But till next Monday night, when I will finally be able to pronounce the guest WeatherBrains name, this is Guest Booking Officer Bill Murray saying good night and God bless. And we almost made it to James, but not quite. Rick, thank you for being here tonight from the Texas Panhandle, I guess. And
I'm glad to do it. I feel a little tired, but I didn't want to miss it. I you know, haven't. Trevor and I have never really talked face to face. This is as close as we've gotten, but yeah, I think this was good stuff. And like I said in the chat, you know, we could have done a two-parter probably with Ryan Maui. So it was good stuff.
It was, and we could have kept him going all night. Trevor, thank you for being here.
No problem. Thanks again for asking me. I told you before, I was always just wanted to be on the show. I felt like it was such a great opportunity to talk about some of the things that mean something to you in meteorology, and that's really what it was. I mean, I could talk for as long as Ryan did about, you know, just the DEF, but social media, left and right, what we've done, what we're going to do, what we hope to do, you know, all those things.
Well, it was an honor to have you on the show, and you're welcome back anytime. Just raise your hand whenever you got something cool you need to talk about. We'd love to have you back.
I absolutely will. Thank you very much.
All right, guys, go get some rest, and we'll talk to you a week from Monday night.
Okay, Bill. Thank you very much. See you, Rick.
Thanks. Bye.
I mean, I just walked in the room and they were beaming up. I don't know if they did that on purpose or not. That was a great show. Really enjoyed listening to Ryan tonight. You know, I've been using his maps from Weatherbell. If you watch the weather extreme videos I do or follow my social media feed, you know that I use his maps extensively. And I followed Ryan on Twitter, and I feel like I know him, but I've never really talked to him before. But he was a fascinating guest tonight. So I want to thank him for being on the show. So again, thanks for understanding our situation with vacations. So the show we just recorded here, the audio version will be released into the wild on Monday, August 4th, and that's the situation there. And wow, you know, it just dawned on me. I just finished my last newscast on television for the Albritton family. Our owner is here for 18 years, and it's almost like, you know, getting a divorce. I mean, it's just horrible. It's just hard, but it just happens in this business. But again, they sold the station where I work to a company called Sinclair, that's now the largest owner of television stations in the country. But I will be off tomorrow, and then Sinclair takes over. They take possession on Friday. But I will say, back in 1996, when I went to work here, it was a gamble for me, and it was a gamble for the Albritons, in that I worked at a very established station with very high ratings here, WBRC, and you know, I walked away from that, risking my career. And in turn, the Albritons, they put a lot of money on the line to build this station and to you know, take two little UHF channels, and without even a signal in the largest city of Birmingham. And it's been a great 18-year ride. And I often criticize myself on the coverage of April 27, 2011. That was the horrible tornado outbreak in my market, where in our state the death toll was 252. But the truth is, I do think that was local television's finest hour in this market. I know we focus on that death toll and how we didn't reach certain people groups and how we could be better at communicating, but I do know that there are many, if not dozens, hundreds of people walking around today alive because of the communications work through the media on that day and disseminating the tornado warnings. And what Robert Albritton did in '96, he gave me the freedom to do that. I didn't have the freedom to do long-form coverage when I was at the other channel. It just wasn't done here. But he gave me the freedom to do that, and when we started doing that here at the news station, that forced the other stations to start doing it, and that's a win-win for everybody. So he will always have that to kind of, you know, he'll always look back and know that. But I think he's selling at the right time. I think he's brilliant. If I had a television chain and if I had an offer like that, I would take it in a heartbeat. In that, you know, things are changing so rapidly in the media business and how people consume media. And Robert will still have the Politico, which belongs to them, which is a really good political news site. And he wants to do some other things as well. But again, I can't thank him enough. It's been a joy working for him, and tonight wraps it up after 18 years. So we'll see if I have a job when I come back. I'll be back at work here Thursday, August 7th. So you know the deal. Like when you come back and you go to come in the building, and this thing, you put it up against the little deal to get in the building, and it doesn't work. That's when you know you're in trouble. So, but I'm going to. We take an annual trip every year. I think a lot of you know that our son plays high school baseball. Our youngest son, he'll be a senior this year, and we've kind of made it an annual thing. Right before school starts, we go to Boston to Fenway Park, and so we're going to be up there watching the Red Sox hosting the Yankees. That'll be a lot of fun, and then we're going to fly down to Fort Myers, Florida, for a college baseball showcase that our son will be in, and then we come back, and I go back to work. He goes back to school. But again, that's it. We're going to wrap it up. But thanks for watching, and again, we'll be back on the regular schedule. That would be Monday, August 11th. We'll see you then. Thanks for watching. Y'all have a great week. God bless and goodbye. Bye.